Welcome to the Private Practice Pro podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping therapists cultivate success. Here's your host, Kelley Stevens.
This podcast is sponsored by Simple Practice. I've been using Simple Practice since 2016, which has helped me run a smooth and profitable private practice over the years. It has simplified everything from scheduling to billing, giving me a better balance between the work I'm so passionate about and the family time I'm not willing to miss out on. Check out the episode notes to get a free 2-month trial of Simple Practice, my preferred all-in-one HIPAA-compliant solution. Welcome back, everyone, to the Private Practice Pro podcast. I'm so excited to have Lindsay here. And Lindsay, can you introduce yourself? Tell us, first of all, just where in the world you're sitting. I think we have people all over the world listening. And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Kelley. It's just such a pleasure to be on this program and such fun to talk to fellow therapists. Right at the moment, I'm sitting in an office in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is my home base. And I'm a therapist and coach, and I wrote the book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, followed by other books. But I am very interested in the psychotherapy and the training of psychotherapists who work with adult children of emotionally immature parents. So this is a perfect opportunity to get to talk with everybody, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm so excited. So you came to me from one of my friends. You were on my friend Stassi's podcast, who's wonderful. And she's actually been on this podcast a few different times. And, when she told me she talked to you, I had like fangirl energy. So I was saying to you off camera, I read your book a while ago, I think in like 2016, 2017. And since then, I have given it to so many clients. And I was kind of saying off camera, too, that as soon as I tell people the title, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, my clients are like, I need that book. Like, they know from the second that they hear the title that they need it. So I'm really excited that you're here. I feel like I'm just like, I've got like nervous, excited energy because I'm a big fan. So can you tell us, because you wrote another book, too, pretty recently. Can you tell us what that one is and is called?
Yeah, that book is called Disentangling from Emotionally Immature People. So It's a little more wide-ranging and general than just talking about parents, because we all know emotionally immature people at work, in our friendships and our social circles. They're pretty widespread, to put it mildly. And so I wrote that book for them. And that book is kind of unique from my others because it's divided up into 50 little mini chapters. Each one has an insight about a particular question that I've been asked in my years of doing psychotherapy. So you can go to the question that interests you and just read, a very few pages about that topic. And so I enjoyed writing it.
That's awesome.
Because it was like, get to the point, get on to the next point, but with plenty of depth in there to help people.
Well, and that's great, too, because people could kind of look up specific situations that they, that's amazing. And also, so we're going to get into your career and your kind of career journey. But before we do that, you also have some resources coming out for therapists, right? Not just for clients. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those?
Sure. Yeah, I think my next book that'll be out in April is actually a guided growth journal. And that is, of course, not therapy, but it is a book filled with journal prompts. And so that's a nice adjunct to working with a book or working in therapy. Can help open up some questions to ask your clients about that are prompts in the journal. And it also helps the person writing them out to get at some stuff that maybe they hadn't thought about before. And then in
awesome.
the fall of 2024, we're going to be releasing a therapy book for therapists on how to work with adult children of emotionally immature parents. And that's going to be probably the the longest book that I've ever written. And it's going to just address the impact of that kind of parenting on a person who comes to therapy, and
Right.
what to look out for and how to work with those people most effectively.
Oh, I'm so excited for that. You are busy.
Yes.
So how is your time divided now between writing and then obviously your promoting your books, and are you seeing clients? Are you teaching? Like, how are you doing all this? This is a lot.
I ask myself that frequently. How is this happening?
Yeah.
Well, the mornings are reserved for, first of all, a cup of coffee and reading the paper. That's me up for the day. And then that's my writing time in the early day. That's when my brain is best. That's when I'm caffeinated. And then in the afternoon, I really have a pretty large set of emails that seems to come in every day. So doing emails and also doing therapy and coaching. I do that in the in the afternoon. So
Oh, wow.
Everything is sort of shoehorned in there.
Right.
And then a deadline comes along and I, levitate into high gear and get it done somehow.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it's amazing that you're still seeing clients too, on top of, this is that's awesome. Really amazing.
Yeah, I've really cut back in the last year because I've had so many writing projects. But I like to keep my hand in. So especially when I'm writing a book for therapists, so that I, sort of don't lose sight of what it feels like.
Yeah. I think that's important. I've had a similar experience where as my business has grown which is teaching therapists how to build private practices, it would be kind of easy at this point to just transition into doing that. But I think it's so important to stay rooted in the therapy room of the experience of what it's like to be a therapist and actually sitting face to face with clients. But sometimes trying to, like you said, shoehorn that schedule can be tricky.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. And, when I agree to see someone, I explain to them that I am spending a lot of time on writing and that I have other commitments. And is it going to be okay with them if we meet every other week or sometimes once a month, just depending on what my schedule's like? So I never accept somebody that I think is really going to need, consistent, frequent therapy. Yeah.
Do people now come to your therapy practice from already having known you from reading your book primarily, or?
Yeah, most of those people are coaching clients. They're all over the United States.
Yeah.
And of course, I can only do therapy in my home state.
Right.
So for the other people, it's strictly coaching for dealing with these types of people.
Wow. That's amazing. And I would imagine that, sometimes I'll read people's books and I'll assume that I wouldn't be able to see them or I wouldn't necessarily be able to call them for therapy because they're so busy. And that's great that you still, are able to see some people. And I would imagine that's as somebody who's read your book, being able to actually talk through some of those concepts would be awesome. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And I do take care of myself in the sense that I limit the number of sessions that I will agree to. So I have a maximum of 10 sessions and we get as much done as we can in that 10 sessions. And it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. That's really smart. And it gives a little bit of containment around that. So can you tell me, the one thing I've wondered about as I was thinking about today was, you've built this big career, you have this book. When you first started out in your career, did you think you were going to be doing what you were doing today back then?
Yes and no.
Tell me. Okay, explain. I want to know.
So my life trajectory is more like I'm a writer who became a psychologist, who then became...
Oh, interesting. Okay, so tell me how that happened.
Well, when I was little, I would write little stories. I kept journals. I was an English major in college. I just always loved to write.
Yeah.
And I, aspired to being a novelist, actually.
Yeah.
But I was also fascinated with people, even more fascinated with people than I was with writing. So I went into psychology, which turned out real well. But always in the back of my mind, I had that thought of, because if you're a writer, you're constantly writing things in your mind. You're constantly remembering things that you want to get on paper. So I was doing that all the time. And then I was making it more concrete when I got the inspiration for my first book back in 2000, when I decided to write a book called Who You're Meant to Be, about how guilt and loyalty holds us back from becoming our best version of ourselves, from realizing our sort of like our life destiny.
Right.
So that was the first book. And then, we were talking about children earlier. Then I had my son, and things kind of got put on the back burner for a while. And then I turned back to the writing.
So when you were writing that first book, did you, now I feel like a lot of times people will self-publish versus being, approached by a publisher. How did your process work? Did you write it before you knew you were going to publish it? How did that all kind of fit together?
Yeah, for the first book, it ended up that actually I think I wrote that entire book before I got an agent. And then my agent got a publisher, but it took the agent 2 years to get a publisher.
Wow.
I mean, and that's fairly typical. I mean, that's not an unusual thing to have it go that long. So that's how the first one came to be. And then the second one just had the stamp of serendipity all over it, because I was at a American Psychological Association meeting in Hawaii. So what a perfect place for serendipity. I was at the conference, and you know how they have these kiosks where they sell books, the publishers sell the books. And I walked by there, and they had a copy of, I think it was Untethered Soul.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, you're the publisher of Untethered
You
Soul.
are, yeah.
That's the best book I ever read. So I stopped in there, and I'm talking to them, and I said, I was interested in writing a book. And she said, oh, well, our acquisitions editor is going to be here tomorrow. Why don't you stop by? And I said, yeah, I'll be here. So I met with her. She really liked the idea. And then through what seemed to me to be quite a lengthy process of discussing the possibility, I signed a contract with them to do the first book. And then from there, it's history.
Wow, that is some serendipity. But also, I would imagine you sat down with them and you had to explain the book and in a way kind of pitch it. So it's not complete serendipity, because if you hadn't been able to articulate it and explain it, it might not have ever happened, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
That's true. But what's funny is that I had the basic idea in the sense of a few terms like emotional immaturity, that they're self-referential, but they're not self-reflective.
Yeah.
A few other things. But I had not written a proposal, and I really wasn't able to pitch it any further than that.
Yeah.
And so right after we met, she said, well, fill out this proposal thing and bring it back tomorrow. And, I'll take
tomorrow. Oh, that's soon.
Right. So I go back to the hotel, and I, furiously, scribbling down these ideas, making stuff up.
Right.
But basically, I was making stuff up based on years of doing psychotherapy. So it flowed pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then from there, that editor helped me to hone it into something that was really marketable.
Wow. So and then that was for adult children of emotionally immature parents, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long did that writing process take then? Oh, so then you started writing the book right around that same time.
Yeah. It took us several months to get it to the point where I was offered a contract because the acquisitions editor, I mean, I'm so thankful to her. This is at New Harbinger. Her name is Cecilia Hanauer. She buffed it, she polished it, she sold it. She came back to me. We worked on changes. We resubmitted it. I mean, all these things that you have to do to get an unknown book in front of the committee at New Harbinger that's going to decide whether to take a chance on it.
Right.
So she did all that work for me. And then ultimately, we got together and got the contract down.
Wow. And then from there, what happens once, maybe I'm a total novice when it comes to books. So what happens once you have the contract then?
Well, I think every publisher is different, but they will give you, what New Harbinger does is they give you deadlines over, say, the next year, 9 months. I probably had a year at that point. And so they'll give you like 3 deadlines for batches. You send 2 chapters in at a time. And they do what's called developmental editing, which they go through what you send them, and they just, make track changes on it and send it back to you. And then you have to make their changes.
Right.
And meanwhile, you're writing the next batch to go into them. And then, that just goes on until the book is finished.
Until you're done. And then how does it, so then you finish and then your piece is done from there, or then what happens after that?
Yeah, when it's finished, I send them the entire manuscript. They read it over and, just make sure there are no unpleasant surprises in there, which you try to avoid.
Right.
And then it goes to the copy editing process, which is where an editor, goes over it, and they look at all kinds of stuff. It's very different actually from proofreading, where they're looking for, grammatical errors,
mistakes,
that kind of thing. In the copy editing, they're looking at the flow of the book. Like, would this paragraph be better up here? Have you repeated yourself in this chapter? Right. What about an example here? They just make the book crystal clear. And they point out how you can achieve that with what you've got. I feel so lucky to have ended up with a publisher that does both developmental editing and I've always had really good copy editors. They have, in my view, they have always improved the book immeasurably, just by that process.
Oh, wow. That is really lucky. So in your subsequent books, have you worked with the same team, or have you kind of each time, is it different?
Yeah, the main editor I've worked with all the way through, but I've had different other managing editors, and each copywriter or copy editor has been different. So there's a lot of change kind of underneath, while my main contact person has been there all along.
That's great. So, and it's been a few years now. So you guys have known each other for a while.
Since 2015 or 14, actually. Yeah.
And one thing you were talking about off camera is kind of, obviously your book is really popular, and then it's kind of had more of a resurgence lately. Again, another wave, or I don't know what you want to call it. So do you have any ideas of what that might be attributed to?
That is such a good question, and we've thought about it a lot. But, frankly, I just think the timing is right. The popularity of this book, as far as I can tell, has been through word of mouth. People tell each other about it. It's had a lot of reviews. I think I have over 20,000 reviews and a 5-star rating on Amazon, so that hasn't hurt. But basically, I think that people are right there, ready to hear what's in the book, ready to hear these ideas. It's kind of like people are waking up to this.
Right.
And I think my book put into words something that they were just about to realize, but they didn't have the words for it.
Yeah.
And there's something about the way our raised consciousness is going, the direction that it's going, that I think the book began to appeal even more to people going along. Because I think there's something in the zeitgeist that is propelling this. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as an outsider looking in, I could see that. I mean, even just in the population I work with therapists, my demographic tends to be therapists from just looking at our analytics on Google and on the social media platforms, tends to be therapists ages like 28 through 40, roughly, in kind of that young career professional. And, since kind of the pandemic, since between 2020 and now, I've seen just obviously a huge explosion of therapists on social media, on more of just a consumption of mental health materials online. And I would imagine that also probably had an impact on your book.
Yeah, I think so too. Definitely.
Yeah, kind of that rise of more therapy in the mainstream.
Yeah, and I think, my impression is that people are taking this stuff seriously now.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that they seem to be realizing it isn't just like, oh, that's a really cool, interesting idea that reminds me of, this person or that person. This is more like, whoa, I'm seeing now what happened to me. It's that kind of reaction.
Right.
And so I think there's this, like I said, a seriousness about it that is there when I don't think it would have been there, 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think also your book in so many ways is so validating of people's experience, but also how I found it to be was validating of what you've gone through, but also empowering to take ownership of your own life and make some changes.
Yes.
Yes. And I think I see that also in the kind of the larger mental health conversation happening now on the internet of just, people want that validation, but also here are some concrete things you can do to help yourself move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why my second book, which is Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents, was, much more practically oriented. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can say.
Hey, therapists. Are you listening to the show and thinking, I really want to launch my own private practice, but I have no idea where to start? Make sure to check out Kelley's Private Practice Roadmap course. In the course, Kelley gives you the exact steps you need to open your own thriving practice. You can find the link below in the show notes.
So I know one question I'll get on this because I put out on my private Facebook group that you were coming on the podcast today is if you were talking to aspiring therapists, psychologists, authors out there, what is maybe one piece of advice you would give someone if they have an idea or an area of passion or niche and they're saying, I want to put out written materials into the world? Do you have anything you wish you had known earlier on?
Yeah. So this would be like people who want to write.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say go for it. I mean, really, because you may have the thing that somebody else needs to hear. And I'm a big advocate for psychoeducation. I mean, I don't look at it as just being entertaining, sort of a genre of self-help that, people read to get some light insight. I want to give people something that they really need for their own development to put out that piece that they're missing.
Right.
And I think there are so many people who have that to offer. So the first thing would be to just assume that you're the answer to someone's problem.
Right.
Okay? And that's not being arrogant or stuck up or anything like that. It's just a good place to start from, because I firmly believe that we get these inspirations and these the sense of mission from something that is inside us that I loosely would call our destiny.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So if your destiny is talking to you and you don't answer with some kind of, corresponding action, I think that it moves on without you. There's a book, I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert, called Big Magic.
I've read it.
And
Yeah.
She says, inspiration will come to you and come to you and come to you. And then finally it's going to stop and go to someone else.
Go to someone else. Yes. Okay. So this has come up on this podcast once before, early in our first season, about this exact concept. And she does talk about this in Big Magic. Like, it's going to eventually, the idea of I forget how she describes it. Anyway, I'll link in the show notes the book, and but I love Big Magic, and she has a really great podcast too.
Yeah. So I think that's the first thing, is that if you have something that you're excited about, chances are your audience will be too.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. Secondly, I would tell people to start taking notes on it. Keep files on your computer, keep a box where you throw pieces of paper that have like little insights that you got. That was my method, because I wasn't a big computer person back then.
Yeah.
But I tell you, it's much easier if you have it in a file on your computer.
Yeah.
If you ever want to find it again, really helpful. But take notes. I mean, if you get an idea in the shower, make sure that you commit to writing it down. That's very important. And then, at some point, you just have to start. You just have to write. And you want to do a crappy first draft.
Yeah.
Okay. Because people, I think, worry too much about having it be something good from the outset. It does not have to be anything good from the outset. In fact, routinely, when I'm writing anything, like from a dead stop, and I move into writing, later on, like the next day or the day after, I will go through it and I'll read, and then they'll be like, oh, bang, that's where it starts. I've written,
interesting.
4 or 5 paragraphs of, intro or overly abstract intellectualization, or, and then there's a point where I guess that part of my brain gets tired, and my truer voice starts to speak. And you can tell when you reread it where that kicked in. And so it's just part of the process that you will probably end up throwing out a lot of your first writing, but that first writing is crucial to getting to the place where you want to go. Like my writing teacher back at the beginning said, think of it like this little car pulls up in front of you, and it says to you, get in. So you get in the car, and it drives all over the place, and you're like, where is this guy taking me? Because we're not getting anywhere, right? And then he pulls up, in front of this place, which is exactly where you needed to go. And he said, you don't have control over where the little car is going to go on the first part of it. You just ride along until it takes you to the place and where you start from. And you could tell that in the rearview mirror. I mean, you can tell when you've arrived there.
Right. Oh, that's such good advice. And I never have thought about it that way. Like, I love what you're saying, where you get a few paragraphs in and then you really start kind of like dropping into that voice. And wow. So tell me, okay, if you had one piece of advice for therapists just starting out, what would it be?
That would be to pay attention to what you enjoy doing and who you enjoy working with.
Yeah.
In my early training, I was given the idea that the good therapist is the well-rounded therapist. And so I had all kinds of training in every different setting you could imagine, inpatient, outpatient, courts, sort of psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapy, had the works. But what I learned was that I was really only as effective as my basic interest. And so I finally had the courage to make it very clear to people that we would be meeting for a couple of introductory sessions, and we were going to see if we were a good match.
Yeah.
I was going to see if I thought I could help them, and they were going to see if they thought they could relate to me as a therapist, and then we would decide whether or not we were going to go ahead.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I ended up with a clientele that I was very well matched to. And I think I did, not only good work, but I think I did deep work with them. I mean, really life-changing work.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could have done that if I had forced myself out of some misguided sense of, being well-rounded, if I had forced myself to take on all comers. So I just want to encourage people to listen to their energy level, listen to their level of interest. If certain clients make you too anxious, okay, consider not working with them. And so I just, I just feel very strongly about that, because I would get a little bit of teasing from some of my coworkers who would say, "Oh, Lindsay only sees this kind of person." It was like, okay, guilty as charged. That they're the people that I do the best work with, and I think you have to know yourself when you're giving this much of yourself to an occupation.
Yes.
You need to do it in a way that it's replenishing to you too.
Oh, 100%. And ultimately is good. That's good for your clients. You become a true expert in the area that they're struggling in.
Exactly. Yes. One thing I'll tell you that I learned that was not necessarily something that, I would advise people about, but it was an interesting thing to me. I had a job with a very prestigious practice early in my career, which ended up going belly up. It was a valuable lesson. That, sometimes what looks, golden is not. But I always felt like I had to keep advancing. Like if I was in a big private practice, my next step had to be to go out on my own, because that's the next step up.
Right.
But I wasn't ready to go out on my own. I didn't want to go out on my own.
Yeah.
I felt like I should, that I was, only a grown up if I did that. But I ended up actually going into a small group practice with some friends, and I stayed there for 19 years. It was like the happiest professional time of my life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had a kind of an unhappy workplace after that practice closed that I was driven into solo practice, because I just didn't feel like there was another place I wanted to go. And then I was very happy in solo practice for about 12 years. So, there's no straight line. And you just do what feels best to you and what feels most supportive and most energizing to you. It's got to be done on where you are at the moment.
Yeah, and a good fit for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I agree, especially with what you're saying about group work. I know for me, sometimes I get lonely in solo. Now I'm solo. It makes most sense for me and my family and having young kids. But I worked in a group and I loved it. I loved being able to open my office door and have other people around and, have the kind of that built-in case consultation without having to have a scheduled time each week. And, it was a really nice camaraderie period of time for me. So I agree with that.
Yeah. And where I went for my solo practice was one of these arrangements where different companies rent out offices in a huge office space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I ended up with actually an old friend of mine who's a therapist right next door. And then one of my best friends took the office on the other side. So even though we had
That's pretty great.
yeah, we had no professional, allegiance to each other. We could do that kind of collegial back and forth. And so it was like the best of both worlds.
That is the best of both worlds. I did that for about a year and a half before the pandemic. So I left the shared group, and then I rented office space with friends. There were 8 of us, and it was the best. I felt like I was in college again. I felt like, I'm just going to walk down the hall to someone else's dorm room, and chit chat. So that was definitely the best. So I don't want to take too much of your time. And I could talk to you for so long about the content of your book, but this podcast really is about career development. And if therapists want to make sure to just kind of be in your ecosystem, do you have an email list, or how could they find out more about that training that's coming on later? What would be the best way to kind of like for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So you have my website. But
okay, perfect. We'll put that in the show notes.
But in terms of getting in touch with me, if they want to, if you don't mind me doing this, Kelley, if they contact you, you are free to give them my email address. I don't like to put it out, just like, but I'm happy for you to share that with anybody who wants to.
Perfect.
That's probably the quickest way to get in touch with me.
Awesome.
And what I'm going to be doing coming up in the, this will be in February, March, and April. I'm going to be doing a therapy mentorship through PESI, the CEU training giant. I've done a lot of day-long webinars with them, and we're going to do a program where you can get a certificate of completion in my therapy methods for adult children of emotionally immature parents.
Awesome. So they could go on the PESI website and find that too. So we'll make sure to link your website and the PESI website too, so they can find all of that.
Yeah, that would be good. And then later on, I may have some social media things that are directed just at mental health professionals. And if you like, I'll get back in touch with you to share.
Yes, definitely. And we can always put it later into the show notes, even later on. So, so make sure if you're listening to this that you check back regularly, and hopefully we'll get all of that. But thank you so much for coming on today. I really, really appreciate having you. And like I said, I love your book. So
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on. Thank you.
Ask Kelley Anything is just around the corner. But first, a word from our sponsor. Stay tuned for Kelley's response to your private practice questions.
Therapists, do you want more clients at your full cash rate? Mentaya is a platform that navigates out-of-network benefits for clients. They get clients on average 70% back on therapy by filing claims and chasing down insurance companies. They handle literally everything so that you can focus on what matters. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and get 1 month free using the code PRO.
Today on Ask Kelley Anything, we are going to talk about raising your private practice fee. And I got one question on Instagram that I've received probably over, 20 or 30 times in the last couple of months, which is, when you are raising your fee, should you raise for only new clients or new and existing clients? This is a tricky one, so let's get into it. In the years that I've been in private practice, I have done it both ways. I've had years where I've only ever raised new clients coming into my private practice, and I've had years where I've raised everyone. Now, what I do is I put in my paperwork that I raise my fee by $10 a year every single January. It's listed in my paperwork. I let people know in the first appointment that I do a yearly fee raise, similar to like a gym or any other membership-based kind of service. And I just say it comes every January, so be expecting it. And so it makes it easier to raise every January because clients have seen it in my paperwork. They've heard about it from me in the first session. However,
There were years when I didn't do it this way. And then I kind of had to ask myself, is it worth it to raise my existing clients or not? I try to raise my fee every year by a little bit rather than making huge jumps. So I try to raise my fee here in Southern California by about $10 per session every year. However, I know other therapists who will wait a few years and then raise by like $50. I like to make little incremental jumps because it doesn't feel as big to me. And if you haven't already let your existing clients know that you're going to be raising your fee, then I might suggest starting out by just raising your fee for new clients and making sure that you put in your paperwork for all new clients that you raise your fee at a set time each year. Now, you can raise existing clients. There is nothing wrong with it. But, I think it's always careful. You always need to be careful to weigh this idea of if you raise the fee, is the fee raise worth the potential of losing the client? And so you have to do it really carefully because sometimes it will rub clients the wrong way if you didn't necessarily let them know ahead of time. But if you've had a client for 3 or 4 years and never raised their fee, it might not be a big deal because maybe they've seen it and expected it coming. But you have to kind of take that on a case-by-case basis. So I would say the very first thing that you need to do is add it to your paperwork for all new people that you raise your fee at a certain set time each year and then kind of go from there. I hope this helps.
Are you wondering how to promote and fill your private practice? Look no further. Kelley's comprehensive online course, Marketing for Therapists, will equip you with the essential marketing strategies to build a thriving 6-figure therapy practice. Don't miss out on this opportunity for success. Check out the show notes to sign up.
If you would like to be featured on Ask Kelley Anything, I love getting listener questions from you guys. Anything about private practice goes. And the best way to do that is actually just to give me a call and leave me a question on my voicemail. So I'm going to tell you the phone number right now and make sure to write it down. Here it is, 805-243-8241. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.